Good day, everyone. Before anything else, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Lian Clarice Reyes, and for today's discussions, we will talk about the Alfred Marshall and the neoclassical economics and the mantle of Leon Walras.
Alfred Marshall.
The most valuable of all capital is that invested in human beings, according to Alfred Marshall. He was one of the recognized English economists that has contributed a lot in the field of economics. He approached economics with an ethical mindset, wanting economics to help explore the ways in which market welfare could improve upon. He wanted economics to attend more closely to the reality of the market instead of higher order logic. He studied mathematics and applied mathematics to formalize Mill's treatment political economy. So he took the classic foundation of economics and combined it with marginal utility and subjective utility approach of Marshall Revolution on 1870s. And that was the neoclassical Keynesian synthesis, one of his known work and his contribution in this field. His specialty was microeconomics, the study of markets and industries. It was distinguished that Marshall Principal Economics was one of his greatest contributions to economic literature. It was the introduction of a number of new concepts, such as elasticity of demand, consumer surplus, and the representative firm, of all which played a major role in the subsequent development of economics. The book Principle of Economics was published during the year 1890, and yes, it is still used to the classrooms around the world. And Marshall was viewed as the founder of the neoclassical school of thought in economics. It became a dominant economic and mathematical book in England. Also, in addition, Marshall's articulation of the relationship between supply and demand was central to neoclassical economists' foundations, and his concepts was endured today in many economic models and theories.
In Marshall Principles, he emphasized that by means of the supply and demand, we can determine the output of the product or services or its price because these two factors act like a scissor blade wherein they intersect in the middle in an equilibrium. So, sa madaling salita, itong dalawang factors na ito, which is the demand and supply, ang nagdidikta kung ano ang magiging price ng isang product or services. I-relate natin siya sa panahon natin ngayon. Ang mahal na presyo ng sibuyas. Kapag bumili ka ng isang piece ng onion sa tindahan, nagko-cost na siya ng 10 pesos or above, which is before mga 5 pesos lang siya or something. So, bakit nga ba nagmamahal ang presyo ng sibuyas? Maaaring mababa yung supply or mataas lang talaga yung demand. Therefore, makikita natin na kapag may changes sa dalawang factors na ito, maaaring maapektuhan ang presyo ng bilihin. Neoclassical synthesis or neoclassical Keynesian synthesis is a broad theory which main focuses is the supply and demand as the driving forces behind the production, pricing, and consumption of a goods or services. It emerged in the 19th to compete with the earlier theories of classical economics. Classical economists assume that the most important factor in a product price is the cost of production. Kumbaga, binibase nila yung magiging price ng isang product sa nagasto sa production nito. While neoclassical argued that the consumer perception of a product's value is the driving factors in its price. Utility, not the cost of production. It is the most important factor in determining the value of a product or services. Dito naman, binibase nila yung magiging price ng isang product kung ano yung may offer nito sa consumer rather than the production cost. Neoclassical synthesis was first coined by Paul Samuelson to denote the consensus view of microeconomics, which emerged in the mid-1950s in the United States. It was believed that the consumer first concern is to maximize their personal satisfaction. Therefore, they make purchasing decisions based on their evaluation of the utility of a product or services. Kumbaga yung mindset ng mga consumers dito is yung personal satisfaction nila kung ano yung may bibigay ng product na ito sa kanila kaya nila ito bibilhin.
Neoclassical synthesis, which has represented mainstream economic thought. It is taught in universities and practiced by researchers and policymakers, with other perspectives labeled as heterodox economics. So, what is heterodox economics? This analysis and study of economic principles considered outside of the mainstream, while most economics accept neoclassical synthesis as the mainstream economic theories because they tend on these theories of market equilibriums and rationality. Classical economics understood production costs as the most important factor in determining the price of the product because it assumed that people were rational consumers. So, the classical economics was focused on economic growth and economic freedom. And they were advocating the laissez-faire because, as they said, they were assumed that people were rational or reasonable. Based on the neoclassical synthesis, government intervention should be focused on short term, such as stimulating demand during a recession and dealing with labor market rigidities such as minimum wages, and monopolies or the executive possession or control of the supply of or trade in a commodity or service. So, in the neoclassical synthesis, suggests that it should be focused on the short term, like dealing with labor markets or the supply and demand of laborers and their wages. Also, monopoly. Monopoly is a market that is selling a unique production in the market that has no competitors. That means they can control the value or price and restrict the other sellers in the market. Marshall wanted to understand how markets adjust to changes in supply or demand over time. So he introduced the idea of 3 periods. So the first is the market period, the amount of time of which stock of a commodity is fixed. Secondly, the short period is the time in which the supply can be increased by adding their labor and other inputs, but not by adding capital. This is the Marshall's term as appliances. And lastly, the long period is the amount of time taken for capital appliances to be increased.
Marshall used these tools to make the economy more sufficient and better. But hindi siya nakontento. In other words, a economy is a evolutionary process in which technology, market institution, and people's preferences is evolve along with their behaviors.
Ngayon, pag-usapan naman natin ang dalawang key elements of the neoclassical synthesis. Una, ang full employment. Ito ay ang pagkilos ng pamahalaan ay maaaring makatulong sa pagsulong ng ekonomiya tungo sa ganap na trabaho. At ang pangalawang key elements ay ang monetary and fiscal policy. Neo-Keynesians eventually came to terms with the fact that monetary policy can be used to control demand and economic expansion. At ipinalagay ng neoclassical synthesis ang kahalagaan ng monetary policy sa pagkamit ng inflation target sa huling bahagi. That's the two key elements of the neoclassical synthesis. Ngayon, dumako naman tayo sa the Phillips curve. During the 1950s and 1960s, the Phillips curve's analysis revealed that there was a trade of policymakers may try to alter the rate of economic growth and inflation by using of demand management, fiscal and monetary policy. Halimbawa, kapag may mataas na rate ng kawalan ng trabaho at mababang inflation, maaaring magpasya ang mga otoridad na itaas ang pinagsama-samang demand. Makakatulong ito upang mabawasan ang kawalan ng trabaho kahit na ito ay magtataas ng inflation. So, next is the pros and advantages of neoclassical synthesis. Pag-usapan naman natin ang one of the neoclassical or marginalist theory of distribution is that treat wages, interest, and land rents in the same way. Unlike the older theories that gave diverging explanations. The second advantages ay ang integration kasama na rito ang theory of production at syempre marami pang iba. The next slide I discuss is about the neoclassical Keynesian synthesis or the neo-Keynesian. Hinihikayat ng sistema ang mas mataas na mga rate ng trabaho. Hinihikayat ng paradigm na ito ang pagkikilahok ng pamahalaan sa mga negosyo. Bilang resulta, kapag naganap ang intervention ng pamahalaan, ang mga negosyo ay tinutustusan at ginagastos. Businesses that expand will generate additional employment levels by opening up more job chances. The existence of a banking system is essential to a nation economy because without it, entrepreneurs and other business risk failing. Because of this, when we are in position of leadership, we must adhere to rigid guidelines.
As we can see on the slide, we are now going to talking about the tax in our economy goods. People need to maintain paying taxes. I know all of us here know that already. And here in our economy, taxes is very important, especially when individual or a company are paying regularly. It helps the economy grows. It comes here the government support the many employers. It can help many employers, examples, a factory worker or a regular employees. Paying low taxes can affect our economy growth, but it benefits the employers as well as many individual and the other way around. Example, if I have my own company of my own beauty product, and my beauty product is already known in the market, sure ako na makakarami akong benta at kikita ako ng mas malaki. If magbabayad ako ng lower tax or mas lower tax, I can earn more in my business so that I can expand it then. Marami ding benefits ito sa mga katulad ko na small business owner na gusto ring mag-business. Dahil bababa ang tax, it can help more other people to be more business-minded, I think. Inflationary risk in the economy can also reduce by this system or model since the government is directly involved and it can reduce the demand of loan. Example, lending someone money for later payment. It is already an example of inflationary risks. It reduce the demand of loans considering that you need to pay it much earlier as you can.
Cons and disadvantages of neoclassical synthesis. The cons is we can provide more and expand more sa ating bansa. But the disadvantages is parang hindi po kaya natin makipagsabayan dahil tayo po ay nasa third country, and isa sa dahilan kung bakit hindi po tayo umaangat is ang pagkakautang. Ito ay kailangan po nating gawin o kinakailangan upang maisalba ang isang bansa. Just like our country, lubog ito sa utang, but kaya po ito nalubog sa utang para i-save mga nasasakupan nito. Then, the government balance the payment of the debt by our tax and price hike sa mga bilihin sa mga tourist spots and pagbenta ng iba't ibang resources.
One of the cons and disadvantages of neoclassical synthesis was stagflation. Stagflation is characterized by the slow growth, high unemployment rate, high inflation, and stagnant demand in a country's economy. Therefore, if the prices of these goods stagnate, inflation will occur. If the wages of employees remain stagnant, inflation can be an advantage in Keynesian economics, but also a leading disadvantage because it can cause budget deficits.
The mantle of Leon Walras. Economics is a dynamic system that changes very fast. That is why a number of problems arose in the time of Leon Walras. He saw that needs to develop the concept or ideas that can be a basis to address the disequilibrium in a market. The greatest of all economists acclaimed by Joseph Scumter as he developed the idea of marginal theory of value, separately but similarly with William Stanley Jevons and Carl Menger. Walras' famous insight can be found in his book, Elements d'Economie Politique Pure, a work contributed to the mathematization of economics by means of the concept of general equilibrium. The main objective of this theory is to identify the circumstances which demand and supply becomes equal to one another and price will be more stable. Walras developed this theory to stress economic problems that were much argued. That is why he is called the father of general equilibrium. General equilibrium theory is also known as the Walrasian general equilibrium. Numerous ideas and concepts of Leon Walras became integral and central part of our modern-day economics. This made him a remarkable contributor to the underlying structure of fundamental economic relationships. So what is market equilibrium? It is where supply and demand are equal, but there are advantages and disadvantages of market equilibrium, or wherein our supply and demand are equal to each other, as I have said earlier. When one of them decreases or increases, prices will either fall or increase. It might cause inflation to our economy. Advantages are, prices will be stable if both demand and supply are equal to each other because they both meet their needs. And which explains, hindi sasobra yung supply natin, so it means, hindi na siya masa-stock up ng matagal and hindi na malulugi yung mga seller. And yung demand, since na may meet siya, lahat tayo nagkakaroon ng opportunity to have that. And hindi na siya tataas yung price because everyone has enough supply.
So next, the works of Alfred Marshall and Leon Walras. The founders of modern neoclassical analysis really contributed at this time. So, moving on, their theory would like to emphasize the function of macroeconomy as a whole instead of a single market. So, because of it, they've shown us the interaction of supply and demand. They want to show how important equilibrium is in economics. Next, so his principle, basically when there's excess demand, the price is high, and there's excess supply, the price is low, till equilibrium is achieved. So, of course, it isn't perfect as businesses can manipulate supply and demand. Recent pandemic is one of the examples. For instance, these sellers can hoard face masks, sell it at high price, then consumers can't do anything about it because these products are highly valuable.
Dito nakikita natin yung pagbaba at pagtaas ng isang presyo ng produkto depende sa demand at supply niya. Nagkakaroon ng awareness yung mga tao sa mga possible outcome sa mga product na binili nila. For example, ng pandemic, alcohol and face mask. Sa sobrang dami ng demand and kukunti lang yung supply natin, yung ibang tao, bumibili sila ng face mask and alcohol kahit sobra-sobra yung presyo niya. Yung maximize profit, equal yung marginal cost and revenue ng isang company sa isa't isa. Yung balance in market and Walras law is not that perfect and there are some drawbacks. Is kahit hindi siya perfect, nagbabalance pa din siya sa market.
Advantages of the mantle of Leon Walras. Difficulties to portray mathematically as economic is related to math. Mathematical economic is a method of economic that utilizes math math principles and tools to create economic theories and to investigate economic quandaries. Walrus law is still being applied to the market. Knowing what to do in the surplus product happening in the market can very beneficial, especially on how high the inflation rate is caused by the recent pandemic. Example, know that the inflation keep people struggle in many ways, especially buying goods. As of now, we know that cost of living was too high and risky because of the effect of demand in the other product. It affects our economy to the point that many people cannot afford to buy many things because of high inflation. Warner's theory of law has a huge help and it has been applied to the other businesses in our economy. It says here that both factors in the market should be balanced and matched.